What if everything you worked for was ripped away in a single day, and your only option was to leave Earth behind? The notification hit Claire Morgan's phone like a meteor, terminated, effective immediately. Just like that, her decade at NASA was gone, her name stripped from the next-gen orbital habitat project, and every door in aerospace quietly slammed shut. She stood in her kitchen, phone in one hand, coffee going cold in the other, trying to process the fact that she no longer belonged in the only world that had ever made sense to her. It wasn't just a job. It was her entire identity, her past, her future, and the last tangible thread to her late brother, Owen, whose memory had powered every decision she'd made since he died in a SpaceX test flight 13 years ago. She dropped the phone. It clattered across the tile like a sound effect in a movie about someone else's life. Claire sat on the floor and stared at the morning light creeping across the cabinets, as though something in the ordinary texture of dawn might still offer her a way back. But there wasn't one. This was it. A scandal she hadn't created had swallowed her whole. The media was already chewing through it, NASA engineer accused of protocol breach, whistleblower or saboteur. The truth was more complex than any headline, and more painful. She had uncovered a potential flaw in the orbital rotation shielding design, but instead of being rewarded for her caution, she was labeled a risk to national security. Dr. Janice Reeves, her mentor and eventual executioner, had thrown her under the bus in front of Congress. No one had come to her defense. No one. As she lay back on the kitchen floor, her eyes drifted to the skylight, where a patch of blue sky stretched across a frame of dusty glass. That sky, once full of wonder and ambition, now felt like a ceiling she'd never break through again. Then her screen lit up again, not with another cruel message or job rejection, but with something unexpected. Breaking, Elon Musk announces pivot away from Mars colonization. New project to build floating city in Earth's orbit. Claire stared, numb. The world had waited decades for Mars. Now Musk was giving it up. She opened the live stream, and there he was, older now, a little slower in speech, but still undeniably the same enigmatic force that had launched a million dreams. Mars is still important, he said, but time is not on our side. Climate change, conflict, and instability demand we create a second platform for humanity, and fast. That's why today I'm announcing Project Halcyon, a self-sustaining floating city in low Earth orbit. Applications for core engineering positions are open to the best minds on Earth, regardless of background. The screen shifted to show an animation of a ring-like structure rotating above the Earth, powered by solar wings, housing hundreds, maybe thousands, of people. Claire felt a tight pull in her chest. She had designed something like that, back when she was a teenager. She'd filled notebooks with drawings and physics estimates, dreaming of something better than the broken ground she'd grown up on. She had called it Sky Haven. That design had gotten her into MIT, where she'd met Owen's friend Jack, and where her future had seemed as limitless as the sky. For a moment, the bitterness in her gut was replaced by something else, hunger. Not for revenge. For relevance. Could she really start again? Could she be part of something like that? As if the algorithm knew her heart better than her head, the next video autoplayed. It was a vlog from a young aerospace content creator, Orbit Chris, who was reviewing Musk's surprise announcement. Halcyon isn't just a new project, he said, it's a reset button for the whole idea of space colonization. Musk says Earth needs an ark in orbit, not on another planet. But who's going to build it? Who's brave enough to leave everything behind and rise above it all? Claire turned off the screen. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't just apply, could she? Not with her name smeared across the internet. She had nothing left. No job. No credibility. No allies. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she had nothing to lose. She opened her browser, pulled up the Project Halcyon application portal, and began typing her name into the required fields. Then she paused. The form didn't ask for references. It asked for a submission, a technical design, a vision for humanity's future off-Earth, and a video explanation. Claire blinked. She looked over at her dusty shelf of binders. Her old high school sketches, her MIT thesis, even her postdoc paper on orbital fluid dynamics, they were all still there. Her fingers started moving before her brain caught up. She compiled her old notes, updated a few schematics, filmed a short video in her living room. It was raw, passionate, and far from polished. She didn't care. She ended it with the only thing that ever really mattered. "My name is Claire Morgan," she said into the lens, "and I still believe in building a world above the chaos." She hit send. Then she slumped back into the couch, overwhelmed by fear and relief. As the hours dragged on, the sky outside deepened to orange, then blue, then black. A few stars blinked into view, distant, steady, uncaring. She wondered if one of them might hold the ghost of her brother. Or her future. Maybe both. Her phone buzzed again. Not a rejection. Not more headlines. Just a YouTube comment. On her old TED Talk, from 3 years ago. Someone had written, "This woman needs to be on Halcyon." Claire smiled, thin and broken. But it was a start. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked up. Maybe she couldn't fix what happened on Earth. But maybe, just maybe, she could still rise above it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Claire Morgan was 12 years old when she first drew a city in space. Not a spaceship, not a space station, a city, with homes and gardens and water cycling through giant translucent tubes, all of it rotating around a glowing Earth like a mechanical halo. It had been just a sketch in the back of her science notebook, but to her it was a lifeline, something realer than the arguments downstairs or the drunk slurring of her father when he couldn't find his work boots. Her mother had left when Claire was 8, and after that, the house had fallen into quiet disrepair, the walls becoming thin barriers between grief and rage. Only Owen, 5 years older and full of reckless dreams, seemed capable of making her feel like the world might one day open up. "We're getting out of here, sis," he would say, his lanky frame silhouetted in her bedroom doorway, the smell of gasoline and motor oil clinging to his hoodie. "One day, you and me, we're gonna live in the sky." Owen had always been different. While their father drank and cursed the government, Owen devoured books on propulsion, engineering, and quantum mechanics, some of which he stole from the town library when they couldn't afford internet. He built a model rocket out of soda cans and old bike parts, and it exploded on their front lawn, setting fire to a dry patch of grass and drawing fire trucks from 2 counties. Their dad beat him with a belt that night. Claire remembered the sound more than the pain of her own cries, remembered how Owen had gritted his teeth and said nothing, then winked at her when it was over. "That's the cost of orbit," he'd whispered. Claire's fascination with space wasn't born from textbooks or telescopes. It came from a desperate need to rise above the noise and chaos of her home. She and Owen would sneak onto the roof at night, lying on a thin blanket, staring at the sky while tracing imaginary cities in the constellations. "They won't take us unless we're the best," Owen had said one night, his voice serious for once. "You know that, right?" Claire had nodded. She believed it with the kind of religious conviction only a child of violence can have, the belief that escape is earned, not given. Owen's path had led him to SpaceX right out of high school. He lied about his age, snuck into an open internship program, and impressed someone enough to be kept on as a junior technician. He used his employee discount to get Claire a refurbished laptop when she was 14, and she cried when he gave it to her. "This," he said, tapping the trackpad, "is your rocket fuel." For 3 years, Owen sent her software, blueprints, and links to obscure engineering forums, and Claire absorbed it all like a sponge. By 16, she'd built a working simulation of a rotating orbital ring that accounted for atmospheric drag, solar radiation, and micrometeorite shielding. She called it Sky Haven. MIT accepted her the same year. She left home with nothing but a backpack and a promise to herself, she would build the place they dreamed of. Then Owen died. It happened on a Tuesday. Claire was 19, sitting in a freshman physics seminar, when the alert came in, a SpaceX test shuttle had suffered catastrophic failure over Nevada. One fatality. She sprinted to the library, opened her email, and saw the name in the subject line. Owen Morgan, notification of incident. The cause was engine oscillation. A design flaw in the modulation sequence. A line of code someone had ignored or overwritten. The company settled with the family, but her father refused the money. He told the reporters Owen had died chasing billionaires' pipe dreams. Claire didn't go to the funeral. She stayed in her dorm, eyes red, devouring every report, every technical log, every frame of video, trying to find what had gone wrong, trying to understand why the one person who believed in her was gone. She stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. For weeks, she existed in silence, headphones on, simulating every variant of the flight in her mind. That was when Dr. Janice Reeves found her. A guest lecturer from NASA, Reeves had been impressed by Claire's orbital velocity presentation and offered her a spot in a classified propulsion research program. At first, Reeves had been like a second mother, strict, brilliant, unflinching, but fair. She saw Claire's grief and turned it into fuel. The only way to honor the dead is to make sure no one follows them, Reeves had said. Claire had worshipped her. She excelled, published, rose through the ranks, and joined NASA full-time after graduation. She earned a seat on the Orbital Habitat Development Team by 25, and when she was named lead systems engineer at 28, she cried not from pride, but from guilt. She had done it. She had climbed out. But she had done it alone. No one left in her life had seen it happen, not Owen, not her mother, not even Jack, the only real friend she had left. Jack had been Owen's best friend in high school, and after Owen's death, he drifted in and out of Claire's life like a fading signal. He left NASA after a failed shuttle test and started a scrapyard down in Arizona, stripping old aerospace tech for black market resellers and private builders. Claire visited once. He'd looked like a ghost of his former self, weathered, bitter, chain-smoking by the dry heat of a hangar that smelled of rust and failure. But when she'd broken down after her termination, he was the only person who picked up the phone. "You want to drink or scream?" he'd asked. "Both," she'd said. "Cool. I've got whiskey and a punching bag." Claire spent 2 days at his shop, talking through the NASA fallout. Jack hadn't judged her. He didn't say she was right or wrong, just reminded her that systems eat people like them for breakfast. "You don't belong in cages," he said, tossing her a beer. "You were always meant to fly." Claire remembered that now as she sat alone in her apartment, her halcyon application sent, the city around her asleep. The streetlights flickered outside her window. Her father was long dead, a stroke in a VA hospital with no visitors. Her mother was a phantom, last seen somewhere in Montana. Dr. Reeves hadn't returned any of her messages. Claire felt like a ghost trapped in orbit, circling a world that had already moved on. And yet, something stirred inside her. A heat. A memory. That rooftop. That sky. That dream. She opened her old files again. Sky Haven. The rotating ring. She remembered the equations, the structural redundancies, the pressurized nodes designed to withstand microgravity and cosmic radiation. It wasn't just a fantasy, it had been science. Her science. She whispered aloud, "What if I could still build it?" A ping. Her email. Subject, application received, Project Halcyon. Below, in fine text, a line that made her breath catch. "Your submission has been flagged for internal review. Do not discuss this application with anyone." Claire stared at it, then slowly let out a breath. Her hands trembled. A laugh escaped her lips, sharp and tired. "Owen," she whispered, "I think you'd laugh at me for doing this." But I also think you'd tell me to do it anyway. She looked up at the stars again, visible now between skyscrapers, tiny lights in the bruised sky. Somewhere up there, a ring was being built. Maybe it was already turning. Maybe it was waiting for her. Maybe everything wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Claire didn't expect the silence to hurt as much as it did. After submitting her Halcyon application, days passed without a single response, no rejection, no follow-up, no confirmation beyond the auto-generated email. She checked her inbox obsessively, every hour, every half hour, refreshing it with the irrational hope that someone, somewhere, would break the quiet and say, "We saw you. We need you." But nothing came. The few people she hadn't blocked after the scandal, colleagues, former classmates, even a couple of professors, stayed eerily quiet, their digital presence vanishing as though she carried some contagious virus of failure. And in a way, she did. In the brutal world of aerospace and government contracts, no one could afford to stand beside someone whose name had been dragged through a congressional hearing. Her firing was framed as a necessary step to restore confidence in the agency's decision-making. Never mind that her warnings had proven technically valid. Never mind that no one else had the courage to say what she did. The narrative was set. Claire Morgan had panicked, disrupted a multi-billion-dollar program, and leaked documents in the process. The public didn't know the truth. Only that she was radioactive. She tried applying for a position at a private satellite firm in Seattle, auto-rejected within 10 minutes. She tried a teaching assistant role at a mid-tier university, nothing. She even emailed an old friend who now worked at Blue Origin. No response. Her bank account reminded her that hope wasn't a strategy. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and the severance package NASA gave her was barely enough to cover groceries, much less months of unemployment. She pawned an old telescope Owen had given her for her 15th birthday. It broke her heart, but it bought her 2 more weeks. Most days, Claire kept to herself in the apartment, reading technical manuals not because she had to, but because they reminded her who she used to be. Sometimes she opened her simulation software and reran orbital station designs from scratch, tweaking angles, playing with spin gravity variables, reprogramming support node redundancies. Her fingers remembered how to solve problems, even if her life had become one she couldn't fix. On the 4th night without sleep, she found herself watching old SpaceX archives, grainy footage of early launches, rockets crashing sideways into the ocean, announcers laughing nervously. And then, there he was, Owen, barely 20, standing in a group behind a Falcon recovery team, his smile bright and stupid, one hand raised in a peace sign. Claire froze the screen. He looked so alive. So absolutely real. The ache in her chest spread like fire. She turned off the screen and pressed her hands to her face, trying not to scream. Her phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m. She answered without checking. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice. "You still breathing?" Claire blinked. "Jack." "Yeah," he said. "You sound like hell." "Thanks. Heard about Halcyon." "You applied?" She hesitated. "Yeah." A pause. Then, "You serious about it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you serious? About going up? About leaving Earth behind?" Claire sat up straighter. "I have nothing left down here." "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer. Jack sighed on the other end. "Look, I got a friend who used to work R&D for Tesla's deep atmospheric systems. He's been tinkering with black market thruster mods. You want to come down here, talk to some people, see what's real? I don't have money to get there. I'll wire you a bus ticket. You'll owe me." "I already do." "Then get moving." The line went dead. 2 days later, Claire was back in the desert, stepping off a Greyhound into the blinding Arizona sun. Jack picked her up in a rusted old truck that looked like it had survived a war. His eyes were tired, his beard longer than she remembered, but his smirk was the same. "Still allergic to sunlight," he said, tossing her a bottle of water. "Only when it's trying to cook me alive. You get used to it. Or you die." Same thing. The scrapyard hadn't changed, metal corpses of rockets, drones, and shuttle fragments laid out like bones across a battlefield. Jack led her into the hangar, where the air was thick with oil and ozone. Inside, a man named Dev sat cross-legged in front of a jury-rigged console, wiring something that looked suspiciously illegal. "He's ex-Tesla," Claire whispered. "He's ex-something," Jack said. "Nobody asks too many questions out here." Dev looked up. "You're the one who got canned for trying to stop the Earth from blowing itself up." "Technically, yes." "Cool," Dev said, then went back to wiring. Jack handed her a beer and leaned against the wall. "Everyone's talking about Halcyon. Not in the press, but the underworld, the labs, the engineers who got pushed out like you and me. They think it's real. They think Musk is serious." "Do you?" Claire asked. Jack took a long sip before answering. "I think he doesn't care about Mars anymore. I think he's scared. Which means something's coming, and fast." Claire shivered despite the heat. Jack continued, "They say the selection process isn't just about your brain. It's psychological. Loyalty. Risk. They don't want people who'll follow, they want people who'll survive." Claire nodded. "Then I'm a perfect candidate. That's what I'm afraid of." Later that night, after Jack passed out in a hammock strung between engine parts, Claire stood alone on the hangar roof, staring up at the stars. The desert sky was so clear it felt fake, like someone had peeled back the atmosphere to show what was hiding beneath. For the first time in weeks, she let herself imagine being up there, not just watching, but working, building, contributing. Not escaping, but ascending. She remembered something Owen once said when they were lying on their childhood roof: "The sky's not the limit. It's the first gate." The next morning, Claire got an encrypted message on her phone. The sender was masked. The message read, "You've been flagged for additional screening. Location, undisclosed. You'll be contacted within 48 hours. This opportunity is not reversible." Claire stared at the screen. She didn't know if she wanted to cry or laugh. She showed it to Jack, who grunted. "That's your ticket," he said. "You sure you want to punch it?" "I'm sure." "Then don't look back." Claire packed her bag, hugged Jack with more emotion than she expected, and boarded a van that arrived the next night with no license plates and windows tinted black. The driver didn't speak. The seats were cold. The air inside smelled like bleach and metal. As the desert receded into shadows, Claire felt her chest rise with something she hadn't felt in months: not anger, not grief, not even ambition, but clarity. She wasn't going back. Whatever was coming, she was ready. The van drove through the night without stopping, windows blacked out, no music, no conversation, just the low, steady hum of tires over pavement and the occasional crunch of gravel whenever it veered off-road. Claire had no idea where she was going, no cell signal, no GPS, no contact with the outside world, only the vaguest sense of direction as stars shifted in the narrow strip of sky she could glimpse through the front windshield. Hours passed. Maybe more. Eventually, the van rolled to a stop in front of a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. A guard stepped forward, scanned the van with a handheld device, then motioned them through. The gate opened with a groan, revealing a dark compound with low buildings, camouflaged by desert terrain, lit only by red floodlights that gave everything an eerie glow. The driver finally spoke. "Out." Claire climbed down, her legs stiff from sitting so long, her senses on high alert. She clutched her bag and followed the silent escort who led her inside, past long hallways, humming panels, flickering screens, until they stopped in front of a steel door. The woman in a black flight suit turned to her. Leave your bag. Step inside. Do not speak until instructed. Claire nodded, heart pounding. The door slid open with a hiss. She stepped into a sterile white room, nothing but a chair in the center and 3 walls covered in monitors. A camera blinked to life. A voice came through the ceiling. Claire Morgan. It wasn't a question. She looked up but said nothing. Your background is a mess, the voice continued. But your math is excellent. Your orbital habitat design shows creativity, efficiency, and instinct. That's why you're here. Project Halcyon is not theoretical. It's under construction, funded privately, and fully operational in Phase 1. But before you're cleared, we need to know what you're made of. The walls lit up with simulations, rotating modules, microgravity drills, solar shield calibrations, emergency decompression tests. You have 1 hour, the voice said. Begin. Claire's pulse jumped as the floor beneath her chair split open to reveal a control panel with haptic interface gloves. She slid them on and dove in. The first challenge simulated a docking sequence gone wrong, thrusters offline, alignment drifting. She rerouted stabilizers manually, timed the approach using rotational inertia, locked the clamps with only 3 seconds to spare. The second test was harder, a solar flare warning with no external shielding. She had to move the station's angle using limited propellant to shield its inhabitants without knocking orbit out of sync. She succeeded, barely. Sweat beaded on her neck. The final test showed an airlock breach with 1 crew member unconscious and another panicking. She had 30 seconds to seal the chamber and isolate the leak while calming the AI assistant that had gone into lockdown. She made it in 29. Then everything went dark. Silence. Claire sat there, her lungs aching from how tightly she'd been breathing. A single light came on. The voice returned. You passed. She exhaled, then laughed, too tired to feel triumphant. The door opened. The same silent escort led her down another hall, through a checkpoint, and into a stark dorm room with a cot, a desk, and a small screen mounted on the wall. Rest, the woman said. You'll be summoned tomorrow. The door locked behind her. Claire collapsed onto the cot, too wired to sleep, too drained to think. She stared at the ceiling, wondering how many others were here, wondering if Jack had any idea what she was stepping into. She closed her eyes, trying not to think of Owen, trying not to imagine his face on one of those monitors. The next morning, she was taken to a larger conference room where 5 other candidates sat waiting. A woman with dark skin and commanding presence nodded at Claire as she entered. You're Morgan, right? Yeah. I'm Adira Rao. Systems Commander. India's Orbital Division. You've got a reputation. Claire sat beside her. The others introduced themselves quickly. Yuri, a tall, grim Ukrainian structural engineer who rarely made eye contact, Sam, a quiet American AI specialist who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, Eva, a Brazilian propulsion tech with a wicked smile, and Malik, a mechanical engineer from Kenya who spoke softly but with precision. A screen lit up in front of them. The Halcyon emblem appeared, a stylized ring encircling Earth, with a single Latin phrase below it, Supra Omnia, Vita. Above all, life. Then the video began. It wasn't a simulation. It was real footage. A massive orbital structure rotating slowly in low Earth orbit, solar panels glinting like wings, pressurized modules interconnected by skeletal arms. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Halcyon was already real. And it was beautiful. Elon Musk appeared next, speaking directly to the camera in a tone far more serious than his public persona. Congratulations, he said. If you're watching this, you've passed Phase 1. What comes next is harder. You'll be tested physically, psychologically, emotionally. Halcyon is not a research station. It's not a government program. It's humanity's next chapter. The Earth is changing. Faster than anyone expected. We don't have decades to reach Mars. We barely have years. Halcyon will serve as a lifeboat, a lab, and eventually a launch point. But only if the people who build it can be trusted. You're not here to follow orders. You're here to prove the impossible is still possible. The video cut off. The lights came up. A new voice entered the room. Claire turned, and her heart sank. Dr. Janice Reeves stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. "Welcome to Phase 2, she said. "Some of you know me. For those who don't, I run systems integration and crew screening. You'll be under my direct supervision for the remainder of training. If you think this is about redemption, forget it. You're not owed a second chance. You're being given an opportunity. Don't waste it." Claire didn't move. Reeves didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge the past, didn't even blink in her direction. It was as if everything between them, mentorship, betrayal, the public crucifixion, had been erased. The crew was dismissed to begin physical assessments, and Claire found herself walking through sterile halls again, this time toward a simulated microgravity chamber where they were to perform basic zero-G movement drills, docking maneuvers, and long-duration focus tests under pressure. She changed into a navy blue flight suit, tied her hair back, and waited her turn while the others rotated through their drills. When it was finally her time in the chamber, she entered the floating environment with both excitement and dread. The simulated zero gravity wrapped around her body like a dream she'd almost forgotten. Her movements were fluid, automatic. She sealed a mock panel, calibrated a control arm, maneuvered through a tight corridor using handholds and inertia. But as she floated past a reflective panel, she saw her face and paused. She looked older than she remembered. More tired. Less certain. A whisper of doubt passed through her like a solar flare. What if she wasn't enough anymore? What if this whole thing was a cruel test with no real outcome? She closed her eyes. Remembered the rooftop. Owen's voice. "They won't take us unless we're the best." Then she finished the exercise, hit every target, exited the chamber, and said nothing. Later that night, Claire sat alone in her assigned room, staring at a tablet showing orbital data of Halcyon's current rotation. Outside, the Earth turned slowly beneath it. There was no noise here. No shouting. No broken promises. Just math and motion. She received one final message before lights out. It was short. "Report to launch bay at 0600. Flight status, go." At 05:59, Claire Morgan stood in the gray-blue light of pre-dawn on a launch deck that looked more like a secret base than anything she'd ever seen at NASA, wind whipping her flight suit against her skin, the massive shape of the Falcon XV rocket stretching into the sky like a cathedral of fire and steel, its fuel systems hissing, warning lights blinking like a heartbeat waiting to be unleashed. The launch bay itself carved into a natural rock basin somewhere west of known maps, hidden from satellites, protected by private security more intense than any military base she'd ever been near, and there were only 4 people standing at the base of that rocket, 4 crew in matching suits, each with their names printed on their chests, and hers read Morgan like a rebuke, like a challenge, like a dare to believe this was real and not some oxygen-deprived hallucination playing in her head since the day she lost everything. And when she looked up at the sky, still dark and deep and full of stars, she couldn't stop the thought, "I'm going up there, I'm leaving the Earth behind, maybe forever, maybe for good." A sharp whistle sounded from the comm tower, and the crew was waved forward. Claire walked with them, silent, focused, adrenaline slicing through her nerves like ice, her training running in the back of her mind, oxygen levels, pressure checks, safety procedures, zero-G acclimation, comm protocols, emergency response, all of it packed into 2 brutal weeks of pre-launch prep that blurred in her memory like the ground beneath a takeoff, and the closer they got to the access lift, the more unreal it all felt, until her boots hit the base plate and the hydraulic platform began to rise with a slow, mechanical growl that made her chest tighten in awe and fear. Beside her, Adira Rao stared forward with the intensity of a commander already halfway in orbit. Sam chewed gum like he was heading to a coffee shop instead of space, and Eva was muttering under her breath in Portuguese, a prayer, or a curse, Claire couldn't tell. The access door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and they stepped into the crew capsule. Compact, high-tech, far sleeker than anything Claire had ever flown in, with biometric seats and a control interface that wrapped around the pilot's side like a cockpit from a sci-fi movie. Once strapped in, the countdown began immediately. T-120 seconds, came the voice through their headsets, calm, professional, but undercut with tension, the kind of tension that only comes when you know there are 10,000 things that can go wrong and only one thin shell of carbon alloy between you and the vacuum of space. Claire's heart beat in rhythm with the ticking numbers. She gripped the armrests, closed her eyes briefly, and whispered to herself, "This is it, Owen. You're not here, but I am. And I'm not backing down." T-60 seconds, the voice said. Claire glanced at the control panel, everything was green. Adira gave a sharp nod. "Crew secure. Systems check complete." "Copy that," the launch director responded. Initiating ignition sequence. The base of the rocket roared to life, the vibrations building through their spines, the deep thunder of combustion rising like a storm, and Claire felt her breath hitch as gravity pressed her deeper into her seat. Launch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. The force hit like a punch to the chest. The capsule jolted upward, pressed down by acceleration so fierce Claire thought her lungs might collapse, her vision tunneling for a split second before stabilizing, the entire Earth dropping away below them in a thunderous blur of blue and white and cloud and speed, faster than sound, faster than thought, just upward, upward, higher, burning through atmosphere like a spear of fire sent to pierce the heavens. Somewhere deep inside the engine walls, Claire knew, a lifetime of engineering decisions were either holding true or preparing to betray them. Every bolt, every weld, every software decision mattered. But the rocket held. It screamed skyward with perfect grace. "Max Q," said Adira calmly. "Structural load is nominal." Claire opened her eyes and saw the curve of the Earth through the capsule window, vast and impossibly beautiful, a swirl of color and shadow and light that made her breath catch, and then the booster separated with a thunderclap of silence, the sudden shift to microgravity causing her to float ever so slightly in her harness. "Separation complete," Sam reported. "Secondary ignition confirmed. We are go for orbital insertion." The rest of the flight was a blur of procedures, orbital alignment, trajectory correction burns, station approach vector, and finally the moment that brought a deep hush over the cabin, visual contact. Halcyon appeared first as a shimmer of metal and motion, a silver ring rotating slowly against the velvet black of space, its structure illuminated by solar wings that caught the sun like sails on some interstellar ship, and as they approached, the true scale of it came into view. Hundreds of meters across, modular in construction, with docking arms, habitat cylinders, and observation decks positioned like spokes on a cosmic wheel. "This is Station Halcyon," came a woman's voice over comms. "Crew 07, you are clear for approach. Welcome home." Home. Claire felt her chest tighten again, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, longing, memory, maybe even joy. The capsule rotated slowly to match spin velocity, and the docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk that vibrated through the hull. Lights turned green. Hatches began to cycle. "Pressure equalized," said Adira. "Initiating boarding protocol." Claire unlatched her harness, floated for the first time in full weightlessness, and moved toward the airlock with careful motions. Her body remembered how to move like this, slow, deliberate, every push an echo in the void. The hatch opened. Halcyon's interior glowed with soft light, clean lines, soft grays and whites, designed to mimic Earth while defying it. The air smelled faintly metallic, filtered through industrial scrubbers, and it hit Claire like a memory of labs and long nights and ideas too big for gravity. They moved through the welcome corridor, a transparent tube that offered a panoramic view of the earth below and the vastness above. Claire stared out and saw her entire life spinning beneath her: oceans, mountains, cities, fires, lights, storms. Everything she had ever known was down there. And she was not. A man floated into view ahead of them, late 50s, silver streaks in his hair, eyes sharp with intelligence and something else, something harder to define, something almost haunted. Elon Musk. He didn't speak right away. He simply studied them one by one, his expression unreadable, before he finally nodded. "You made it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "You've crossed the line most never will. This station is Phase 1. By the end of the year, Phase 2 will begin: expansion, permanent rotation, biosphere modules, independent governance." He paused, then looked directly at Claire. "You're here because you're the ones who don't quit. Who got kicked out, betrayed, abandoned, and still kept building. Halcyon doesn't need resumes. It needs believers." Claire felt the others shift around her, their faces caught between awe and skepticism. Musk continued, "We're not here to escape Earth. We're here to buy it time. To learn, to build, to prepare for what's coming. Climate collapse. War. Resource scarcity. It's not theoretical. It's now. Down there, the world's on fire. Up here, we have a chance to create something better. But it won't be easy. There will be setbacks. Risks. Maybe even deaths. This place isn't safe. It's just necessary." He handed each of them a slim black badge. "Crew status. You're in. But not forever. Your work starts now. We'll see if you can earn your place here permanently." Then he floated away, just like that, leaving them in stunned silence, the earth turning quietly behind him. Claire stared at the badge in her hand, her name engraved in silver beneath the halcyon symbol. She closed her fist around it. She had made it. Through every loss, every betrayal, every doubt, she was here. In orbit. In motion. In the sky. The first sensation Claire noticed wasn't the weightlessness, it was the silence. Unlike any Earth-based laboratory or launch site where background noise was a constant hum of machinery, Halcyon floated in a near-sacred quiet, punctuated only by the subtle clicks of magnetic fasteners and the occasional soft whoosh of pressurized air systems maintaining equilibrium. As she and the rest of Crew 07 drifted deeper into the station, guided by a tall, dark-haired woman in a crisp silver uniform named Lieutenant Sky Moreno, Claire began to feel the full scale of Halcyon's ambition. It was not just a station, it was a prototype for a civilization. The ring corridors curved gently, lit by daylight mimicking LEDs calibrated to Earth's circadian rhythm. Every 20 meters, small porthole windows offered a glimpse at the dark ocean of space or the glowing planet below. Modules branched out from the central corridor like spokes from a wheel, one labeled biosphere, another power grid, another command. Moreno led them through the main habitat module, where a row of sleeping quarters lined a curved wall, each one no bigger than a walk-in closet, but equipped with fold-down beds, personal lockers, and an interactive console embedded in the ceiling. "Choose one," she said. "They're unassigned for now." Claire floated to the third from the end and tapped the biometric pad. It scanned her fingerprint and eye, then opened with a soft chime. Inside was just enough space for a person to live, not to hide. She didn't unpack, there wasn't anything to unpack. She stored her flight suit and attached her badge to the wall beside the sleeping platform. A message appeared on the console: "Orientation in 30 minutes, command module briefing." She exhaled and let herself float gently into the sleeping berth, staring at the ceiling. Already she could feel the difference between Halcyon's microgravity and the simulated environments she trained in. Here, weightlessness wasn't a setting, it was reality. She pushed gently off the wall and navigated back into the corridor, where Malik floated beside a hydroponics viewport, watching lettuce grow in perfect zero-G symmetry. "It's strange," he said without turning. "Seeing food grow without soil. Without gravity." Claire nodded. "Strange but beautiful." "Efficient," he replied. "The roots aren't fighting gravity. They're free. Like us, I guess." She didn't respond. The idea of being free still felt too foreign. At 0900 station time, the crew assembled in the command module, which resembled the bridge of a starship more than a control room. A wide wraparound display showed orbital data, live feeds of Earth, and a real-time status report of Halcyon structural integrity, oxygen levels, solar power intake, and station rotation. Dr. Janice Reeves was waiting for them. "Take a seat," she said. "Or anchor, rather." Claire clipped herself to a wall strap and steadied herself. Reeves activated a holographic diagram of Halcyon. "What you see is a third of the final build. We're operational, but vulnerable. Phase 2 begins now. Your mission is to stress test every system, assist in modular expansions, conduct life support experiments, and most importantly, document everything. We're not building for aesthetics. We're building for replication. Eventually this station design must scale to support thousands." She turned, floating gracefully between them. "Each of you will be assigned a sector. Your assessments will determine whether you stay on board, rotate back, or get replaced. I expect complete transparency. Fail silently, and you risk all of us." Her eyes locked briefly with Claire's. Still no recognition. No trace of the past. Just cold professionalism. "Claire Morgan, you're assigned to Sector 7, Structural Systems and Orbital Stability. You'll be paired with EVA drone pilot Yuri Sokolov." Claire nodded. "Understood." Reeves moved on. "Sam, you're handling AI infrastructure diagnostics, including the onboard autonomous maintenance routines. Malik, your propulsion support. Eva, hydroponics and biosphere. Adira, you'll lead emergency protocol drills and crew health metrics. Rotation schedules will be posted daily. Report any anomalies directly to me or Lieutenant Moreno." She turned off the display. Dismissed. As the others floated out, Yuri gave Claire a sideways glance, almost smirking. "Hope you're not scared of heights." "We're 250 miles above Earth," she said. "I think I'm past that." He grunted and gestured. "Come on. Let's check the stabilization node." They passed through a docking corridor and into a maintenance hatch where the gravitational simulation faded completely. Here, in the outer modules, the sensation of floating was absolute, with no spin gravity or artificial assist. Claire gripped the handrails and followed Yuri into the node chamber. The module was filled with gyroscopic stabilizers, laser-guided alignment sensors, and electromagnetic balancing cores. "We monitor for drift," Yuri explained. "If one axis wobbles, we compensate. If we miss it for more than 90 seconds, the whole ring destabilizes. The goal is harmony." "What about asteroid debris?" "We use forward radar sweeps and autothruster nudges. Not foolproof. If something hits at the wrong vector, we don't get a second chance." Claire opened a panel and ran diagnostics. So far, all systems read green. But the interface code looked rough. "Did someone code this in a rush?" she asked. "More like desperation," Yuri replied. "Some modules were installed ahead of schedule. They wanted to be online before the G7 conference in Geneva. Optics. Always." They worked in silence for the next 3 hours, checking bearings, recalibrating spin tolerances, and marking one error log in the system that showed a slight time lag in the gyroscopic input stream. "Could be nothing," Yuri said. "Could be a future catastrophe. Either way, we flag it." At 1,400 hours, the crew assembled again for a check-in meal. They gathered in the nutrition module, floating gently around a magnetic table bolted to the wall, each with a sealed food pouch clipped in front of them. Adira led a brief mindfulness exercise, followed by a physical conditioning session involving elastic resistance bands and core rotation drills. Claire's muscles burned in unfamiliar ways, and for the first time since landing, she felt fatigue creep into her limbs. After the session, she floated back to her berth and tapped the console. A message blinked. Unauthorized file access detected, user, Morgan, logged at 11:43 Universal Time Coordinated. Her stomach turned. She hadn't accessed any files besides her assigned ones. She opened the system logs and scanned them. There it was, someone using her credentials had attempted to open a restricted design file, HAL 002B, access denied, auto-flagged. She stared at the terminal. Was someone trying to set her up? Or was this some test? She floated quickly to command and asked to speak with Reeves. The assistant AI responded, Dr. Reeves is unavailable. Please log your report with Security Node 3. Claire submitted the report and returned to her berth, heart racing. A minute later, a private message appeared, access attempt noted. Continue your work. Do not speak of this. Claire stared at the signature. Just the letter M, Musk? Moreno? Someone else? She didn't know. But the warning was clear. The game had changed. Later that night, Claire floated in her darkened berth, unable to sleep. The stars outside winked in silence. The earth turned, glowing softly like a forgotten dream. And Halcyon, humanity's last hope, or its final failure, drifted between them like a promise made of metal and fire. Something inside her shifted. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a piece of this machine. And she would not be broken again. The alarm was almost beautiful in how understated it was, not a blaring siren or flashing red light like in the movies, but a single tone, long and low, echoing through the station like a whisper from the hull itself, and Claire was mid-shift in Sector 7 when she felt the shift in pressure that made her instincts scream before her mind caught up, a barely perceptible drop that signaled something no one aboard Halcyon wanted to hear, decompression. She was at the outer corridor near a maintenance array when it started, examining the anomaly in the Euro lag flagged yesterday, and at first she thought it might be her own suit misreporting data, but then the sensors along the wall blinked yellow, then orange, and then the emergency seal routines kicked in, bulkheads locking into place behind her, isolating her and Yuri inside the most fragile section of the station, right where the structural arms extended toward the solar farm, one of the newer, hastily installed modules still not rated for long-term occupancy. Did you feel that? Claire asked, voice sharp in her calm, pressures dropping. Yuri said, already bracing against the wall, his gloved hands moving fast across the manual diagnostic panel. I'm seeing it too. Micrometeorite strike, maybe? Or, a second alarm joined the first, this one urgent. A voice came through the comm. It was Adira. All personnel, seal positions. Pressure loss detected in segment 7 Gamma. Drone recon en route. Claire, Yuri, confirm status. We're in 7 Gamma, Claire replied, pulse thudding in her ears. Bulkhead sealed. Environmental integrity holding but dropping steadily. Visual inspection underway. Stay put. We'll route the drone. Negative, Yuri interrupted, floating toward a manual access point. We don't have time for a drone. We find the breach ourselves or we both die in here. Claire didn't argue. The oxygen reading on her suit display was dropping, slowly, but enough to matter. They activated their helmet seals and floated down the corridor, using handholds as the room tilted slightly, a tremor echoing through the structure as the artificial gravity support attempted to compensate for the imbalance. A thin mist of condensation had formed near the far bulkhead, where Yuri paused and activated a spray of ultrafine polymer particles. Within seconds, the particles clustered against a hairline crack no longer than Claire's little finger, but enough to cause atmospheric bleed at their altitude. Got it, Yuri grunted. Pressure patch? I'm prepping one. Claire opened the emergency kit clipped to the wall and pulled out a sealant frame, a rectangular patch designed to magnetize against composite walls and reinforce from the inside. She aligned it over the breach and activated the seal. A bright blue gel expanded across the crack, hardening instantly, the color fading as it cured. Readouts turned green. Seal complete, she said. Stabilizing. Copy, Adira said through comms. Reading normal levels. Drone confirms seal integrity. You're cleared to return. Debrief in command at 1600. Yuri leaned back, his breath fogging his visor. That, he muttered, was close. Claire nodded, not speaking, not even moving for a second. She floated in place and felt the weight of what almost happened. If they hadn't been there when it struck, the breach could have vented half the module. It could have ripped through others. The station wasn't built for multiple errors. Halcyon was still fragile. And now, suddenly, it felt even more so. They returned to the central axis, shedding their helmets once they re-entered the pressurized module, their faces slick with sweat, muscles stiff from tension despite the lack of gravity. Claire ran a full diagnostic again and logged the event, then checked the timestamp. It matched the exact same moment she had received that strange warning message, "Do not speak of this." And now a hull breach. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. At 1600 hours, the crew gathered again, this time in the larger briefing hub, a semi-spherical room with holographic projection abilities and a live comm link to Earth if needed. Reeves stood in the center, arms crossed, expression hard. This was not a drill, she began. We experienced a real decompression event in Sector 7 Gamma, consistent with external impact. Preliminary analysis suggests a debris fragment, possibly an old satellite casing, penetrated the shielding. Fortunately, the strike zone was manned. Quick action by Morgan and Sokolov prevented full decompression. A brief silence followed. Sam raised his hand. Shouldn't the station have debris shielding for that? It does, Reeves said. But only in fully rated sectors. 7 Gamma was part of the latest install, not yet upgraded. It was scheduled for reinforcement next week. So we were lucky, Eva muttered. Luck had nothing to do with it, Reeves said, turning to Claire. Morgan, walk us through your response. Claire kept her voice steady as she explained the polymer mist technique and patch deployment. Reeves didn't interrupt, didn't offer praise, just nodded once at the end. Efficient. Textbook response. You may have just saved this crew. Claire felt the others glance at her, not with celebration but with something quieter, respect. Unspoken but real. Reeves shifted the projection. There's something else, she said. A new image hovered in the air, a slowly rotating module, darker than the others. This is 12 Kappa. A storage array tethered 80 meters off the main ring. It holds backup data and power cells. Last week, someone attempted to access its control system using unauthorized credentials. She didn't look at Claire. But everyone else did. We tracked the breach to an internal terminal, Reeves continued. Security protocols were triggered, but before we could identify the source, the log was wiped. Someone with access used Morgan's credentials. Claire felt heat rise in her chest. I didn't authorize any access. I filed a report. We know, Reeves said. That's why you're not in lockdown. But someone is using your ID. Which means someone on board is trying to access restricted systems. Adira spoke next. Why would someone want the 12 Kappa files? That's what you're going to find out, Reeves replied. Starting tomorrow, each of you will be assigned to an internal audit. Pair up. Watch each other. No one moves alone unless authorized. If this station is compromised from within, we need to know now, not after something worse than a crack in the hull takes us down. Malik shifted uncomfortably. Is Musk aware? Yes, Reeves said. He authorized full transparency. Halcyon only survives if we stay ahead of sabotage, intentional or otherwise. That word echoed through Claire's head long after the meeting ended. Sabotage. Not error. Not miscommunication. Someone was trying to damage the station. And they were using her name to do it. That night, Claire reviewed the access logs again. Her credentials were used at 11:43 Universal Time Coordinated. She checked the camera feed. The terminal was in an empty corridor near 12 Kappa's signal repeater. No footage. That section was in shadow. A blind spot. Deliberate? She didn't know. But she couldn't ignore it anymore. As the station drifted in silent orbit over the Pacific Ocean, she sat alone in the observation deck, Earth glowing beneath her like a living jewel, clouds spiraling over continents, thunderstorms dancing across the surface like neurons firing in a brain too vast to comprehend. She tried to remember why she had come here, what it had felt like to look up from Earth and dream of space, of exploration, of something greater than herself. But now, the dream was stained. There were secrets here. People playing games even in the sky. And if she didn't find out who, Halcyon would fall. Not from the vacuum outside, but from the betrayal within. Somewhere in this floating city, someone was hiding the truth. And they were using her as a shield. She stared down at Earth. "I won't be your pawn," she whispered. "Not again." The power flickered at exactly 3:17 station time, just for a moment, barely more than a blink, but long enough to reset 3 systems, trigger 2 error logs, and wake Claire from the restless half-sleep she'd fallen into in her berth, the dim blue glow of her console snapping off and on again in eerie silence, followed by the hushed mechanical whir of systems reinitializing themselves like a breath caught in the throat, and she knew before checking that it wasn't a random glitch, because nothing on Halcyon was random anymore, not after the breach, not after the stolen credentials, and certainly not after the creeping suspicion that someone on board wanted to see this place fail. She floated upward, heart pounding, fingers reaching for the nearest comm pad, but instead of calling security she brought up the system diagnostics herself, eyes scanning fast through the auto-flagged incident log that had already populated 3 lines, each marked with the same code, Orbital Network DE Sync, temporary. But line 4 was different. Line 4 simply read, File accessed, Ghost 23. Her pulse stopped. She tapped into the restricted archive manually, bypassing the GUI, diving into the back-end with the same protocol she'd once designed for orbital defense telemetry back at NASA, a part of her past she rarely acknowledged now but one that had burned itself into her fingers like code she'd never forget, and after 3 input cycles she reached a node marked HAL Confidential, black level, where the Ghost 23 label pulsed softly next to a string of metadata that didn't make sense, file origin. Unknown, date, not applicable, size, variable, content, encrypted. She hovered her fingers over the decrypt sequence, hesitating just long enough to ask herself the obvious question, what if this was bait? What if someone had planted it under her ID to trap her again? But then she remembered the crack in the hull, the stolen badge access, the eerie silence when she asked too many questions, and something deeper than caution pushed her forward. The encryption was layered, not AI-generated but human, sloppy in some places, elegant in others, and that told her what she needed to know. It wasn't official, it wasn't Halcyon protocol, this was personal. After 14 minutes, she cracked the outer layer. The file opened with a grainy video, blurry, infrared, time-stamped 2 months before the station's public launch date, showing a segment of the station that didn't exist on any current blueprint. A rotating module labeled Sovereign 1, its outer plating darker, less reflective, more military than industrial, and on the screen, figures in pressure suits moved with mechanical efficiency, loading sealed crates into the module through a transfer hatch Claire didn't recognize. Then the screen blinked and shifted to audio, a hushed conversation between 2 men, one of whom was unmistakably Elon Musk. The voice was tired, worn, like someone 5 steps past the point of ethical compromise. The Earth won't last 50 years, Musk said. Not at this trajectory. We need a contingency, not just a symbol. The other voice, older, gruffer, replied, you mean a vault. More than that. A firewall. We put what matters up here, seal it, automate it, protect it from the collapse down there. Even if Earth burns, we preserve the code. The code? Genomes. AI architecture. Human history. What's worth saving? This station, Halcyon, it's the decoy. Sovereign is the core. Static. Silence. Then the feed cut out. Claire stared at the terminal, hands numb. This was it. The real reason Halcyon existed wasn't just to test orbital sustainability or prototype zero-G cities, it was a cover for something bigger, darker, something built behind layers of secrecy so thick not even the core crew knew it was there. Sovereign 1. She scoured the station directory, but there was no trace of it. No docking record. No schematic. Either it was gone or, more likely, it was hidden. Still connected. Still watching. She sealed the file, burned the temporary cache, and logged out. But the question wouldn't stop spinning in her mind: if Sovereign 1 existed, and it was built to survive Earth's collapse, then who decided what was worth preserving? Who made that call? And why was the rest of the crew kept in the dark? She didn't sleep. At 7 o'clock, she met with Sam in the Data Systems module under the pretense of coordinating on system sync. He was already awake, typing fast at a floating panel, his legs anchored loosely to a strap near the core drive. You saw the flicker? He asked without looking up. Yeah, Claire said. More than a flicker. It accessed something. Sam turned toward her, eyebrow raised. You mean the ghost protocol? She blinked. You knew about it? Only the label. I tracked it last week. Thought it was a rogue backup cycle. But it doesn't show up in system registry. It ghosts in, ghosts out. No trace. Have you seen Sovereign 1? He stiffened. Where did you hear that name? It was in the ghost file. He lowered his voice, checked the perimeter for listening devices, then floated closer. 2 months before launch, I intercepted a burst packet during testing. Encrypted ping, directed from a deep space relay off the books. It pinged something just outside LEO, too small for a full station but big enough for an autonomous habitat. I filed a report. Musk's team pulled me off network oversight 2 hours later. You think it's real? Claire asked. I think it was built in secret, launched before Halcyon went live. It's either nearby, cloaked, or it's buried in the telemetry so deep even we can't see it. Claire felt the pieces start to connect: the unauthorized access, the breach, the blind spots, the altered logs. Someone was covering tracks, and whatever Sovereign 1 was holding, it was important enough to risk sabotaging the entire mission just to keep it hidden. What if it's still linked to us? She asked. What if the breach in 7 Gamma wasn't a mistake? Sam didn't answer right away. Then we're passengers on a ghost ship with someone else at the helm. That day, the station continued its quiet rotation above Earth, passing over continents burning with wildfires, oceans swelling with unseasonal storms, cities flickering in and out of view like lights on a failing circuit board, and Halcyon remained silent, obedient, unaware that one of its own now held the key to a secret that could unravel everything. At dinner, Claire sat beside Yuri, who looked tired but focused, his eyes scanning the crew with the subtle paranoia of someone who'd seen combat and never truly left it behind. She leaned toward him and whispered, "You ever hear of something called Sovereign 1?" His jaw clenched. "Where did you get that name? Why does it matter?" "Because I was part of the ground team that built its core shield system. Back when I worked for a private defense contractor. NDA sealed, everything hush-hush. They told us it was an experimental AI vault. Autonomous, unhackable, survival rated. So it exists. "Oh, it exists," Yuri said. "But they never told us what was inside. And when I started asking, I got reassigned. Then Halcyon happened. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I thought it was buried. And because I wanted a fresh start. But now," he looked at her, hard. "Now I think you just put a target on your back." That night, another message appeared on Claire's console. No sender. No reply path. Just one line: "Stop digging or we seal the airlock." The war had begun. And it was already inside. The threat sat there like a ghost in Claire's mind, blinking in silence on her console. "Stop digging or we seal the airlock," and she stared at it for a full 60 seconds, not because she didn't understand it, but because she did, completely, and that was the part that turned her blood to ice, because someone aboard Halcyon had decided the secrets buried in Sovereign 1 were worth killing for, and now they were done with subtlety, done with deception, now they were warning her outright, daring her to keep going, to defy the unspoken rule that had quietly governed every corner of the floating city since the beginning: don't ask what came before launch, don't dig into the buried blueprints, and never ever mention the modules that didn't officially exist. Claire didn't log the message. She copied it to a hidden offline device, a repurposed telemetry reader stripped of all syncing capabilities, stored deep in her personal locker with enough encryption layers to make a Pentagon hacker sweat. And then she went back to work like nothing had happened. That was the only way now. Blend in. Look busy. Don't move too fast. She met Sam at hydroponics at 9 o'clock station time, under the pretense of assisting Eva with water filtration recalibration. Eva gave them both a polite nod, barely glancing up from her datapad, which was a relief. Claire handed Sam the reader when Eva turned toward the nutrient basin. He slid it into a utility belt without a word. "We're being watched," she whispered. Sam didn't blink. "How closely?" "Threat level." "Airlock." Sam's jaw flexed. "Okay," he muttered. "Time to move the plan forward." They waited until the sleep cycle, when Halcyon dipped into its designated rest period, lights dimmed, non-critical modules powered down, and only essential operations continued under autonomous AI routines. The floating city grew quiet, like a slumbering animal in the dark, its rotating segments humming softly through space as the planet turned silently below. Claire floated to Sector 3 Alpha, the oldest part of Halcyon and the one closest to the central data spine. This sector was originally part of the Pathfinder Array, a research platform from a prior Musk initiative that had been cannibalized to create Halcyon's backbone. That meant it still carried old ports, legacy drives, and buried subsystems that newer engineers ignored because they didn't show up on current maps. Claire had spent weeks digging through station schematics, real ones, not the scrubbed PR diagrams, and found a backdoor into the archive core. Not the visible library that housed public telemetry and biosphere logs, but the real one, the black box Musk never talked about, the part of the station that was never supposed to be touched again. Sam met her outside the old docking bay at 3:42. He carried a modified maintenance tablet, stripped of its locator beacon, shielded with reflective foil. Claire opened the bulkhead using an emergency override key granted for environmental review, a request she'd filed 6 days earlier under a bureaucratic haze of eco-sensor calibration. The hatch hissed open. Beyond it was dark. No lights. No atmosphere sensors. Just a crawl tunnel lined with ancient cables and frost-covered conduits, a place forgotten by everyone else, but not by her. They floated in, clipping themselves to the central rail, moving hand over hand through the black. The crawlspace smelled faintly metallic, sterile, and dead. After 20 meters, Sam stopped. "This is it," he whispered, tapping a panel. "Found the legacy access port. If Sovereign 1 ever fed data here, we'll find residue. Can you get in without triggering the watchdog?" "Only if I'm lucky." He connected the tablet and initiated a non-destructive deep trace, one designed to emulate the signal signature of routine station telemetry, a trick he'd once used during a Mars rover simulation to bypass an autonomous firewall. For 20 seconds, nothing happened. Then the tablet lit up. Claire leaned in. "That's a data tree," Sam said. "But it's fragmented." "Fragments of what?" "Personnel logs. AI subroutines. And something else, something newer than the rest." The screen showed a file dated 10 days ago. Claire frowned. "That's after we arrived." "Exactly. Someone on board is using this port." Sam opened the file. A small window expanded with text, notes, or maybe a diary. Fragmented, partially overwritten. But enough to read. Entry 144, Sovereign 1 reactivated. Tether intact. Watchdog reset. Awaiting protocol greenlight. Then another. Entry 145, Morgan flagged. Observe. Do not intervene yet. She froze. "They're watching me." "Not just you," Sam said, scrolling. "Look, next entry, entry 146, EVA incomplete. Adira resisting. Sokolov unstable. Initiate containment if necessary." Claire's mind reeled. The logs were operational, meaning someone, or something, was logging psychological profiles on the crew and making judgment calls about their roles. This wasn't passive surveillance. This was active analysis. And Sovereign 1 was still live. "This isn't just a vault," she said. "It's a vetting program." Sam nodded grimly. "They're filtering for survivors. Not everyone's meant to make it." A soft ping interrupted them. Sam's eyes widened. "We're not alone." Another ping, then another, coming from the tunnel behind them. Someone had followed them in. Claire killed the tablet screen, pulled out a signal scrambler from her pocket, a basic frequency disruptor used during EVA walks, and jammed the port. Sam grabbed the tablet and clipped it to his harness. "Move," he whispered. They retreated back down the tunnel, heartbeats loud in their ears, limbs moving fast but silent, the station's hum growing louder with every meter. A shadow passed the far end of the corridor, a shape in a suit. No lights. No voice. Just presence. Claire clipped through the hatch and slammed the override shut behind them. The lock hissed. Sam reconnected the panel and ran a scan. Who was it? "No ID," he said. But they didn't follow through. Just watched. A warning. Or a test. Back in the main hub, they cleaned up the evidence, wiped the tablets, burned the trace logs, and returned to their modules like obedient little astronauts following their designated duties. At the next shift meeting, Reeves didn't mention the incident, didn't acknowledge the power flicker, and didn't look at Claire once. But Adira did. She locked eyes with Claire during the station-wide health review, her gaze sharp and knowing. After the meeting, she cornered Claire in the airlock staging bay. "They told me to keep an eye on you," Adira said. "They didn't tell me why." "Do you know what Sovereign 1 is?" Claire asked. Adira didn't flinch. "Only what I guessed. That we're not the first. That we're not the center of this. We found logs," Claire said. "Psychological monitoring. Threat assessments. You're on them. So are you." Claire hesitated, then said, "We need allies." Adira looked around, then nodded once. "I'm in. But you better move faster than they do." That night, Claire stared out the window again. Earth turned below, brilliant, fragile, burning in pockets where storms raged and city lights blinked like dying embers. Halcyon floated above it all, perfect and sterile, a monument to ambition. But Sovereign 1 was something else, something darker. A cold arc, watching, judging, storing what it deemed worthy. Claire clenched her fists. She didn't come here to be judged. She came here to build. And she would not go quietly into their archive. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The station seemed quieter after Claire and Adira made their unspoken alliance. It was the kind of silence that felt less like peace and more like waiting, the calm before the storm, the air thick with things left unsaid, with glances that lingered too long and footsteps that stopped when you entered a room. Claire floated through the corridors of Halcyon with a new kind of awareness, every hum of machinery and every flicker of light amplified in her mind, as if the entire station was holding its breath. She had expected fear, maybe panic, after the direct threat to her life. Instead, she felt something colder, the creeping certainty that someone was watching, and that their reach extended deeper than she could imagine. The next day, she met Adira in the hydroponics bay, a place where green shoots sprouted in zero gravity, fragile and defiant, a strange contrast to the harsh metallic reality around them. Adira was already there, tending to a cluster of leafy plants with a focus that made Claire think of a soldier preparing for battle. "What now?" Claire asked, scanning the bay for cameras or hidden microphones. "Now, we gather information," Adira said quietly. "I have contacts in the data management sector. They're loyal to the original vision, the one Musk promised publicly, not this secret survival vault." Claire nodded. "Can they get us access to internal comm logs? The ones not visible to regular crew?" Adira smiled grimly. "I can try. But if Sovereign One is watching, it'll be like swimming in a shark tank." Claire's jaw tightened. "We're already in the tank." Over the next 72 hours, Claire's routine fractured. She kept one eye on her work assignments, maintaining the illusion of normalcy, while the other hunted for signs of the unseen watchers. The airlock incident had left subtle cracks in the station's perfect facade. Unexplained power dips, missing comm pings, encrypted files blinking in and out of existence like digital phantoms. One evening, while reviewing system logs in the central hub, Claire stumbled across an anomaly. A data packet, disguised as routine maintenance telemetry, had been sent out from Halcyon to an unknown receiver beyond geostationary orbit. The transmission lasted exactly 43 seconds and contained a burst of encrypted data. Claire's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a surveillance leak, it was a signal. A message sent from the station, from within its very walls, to someone, or something, outside. She shared her discovery with Sam and Adira in the cramped privacy of the storage bay, where tools and spare parts crowded every surface. "They're talking to whoever built Sovereign One," Sam said, eyes wide. "Or to a command center we don't know about." "But why?" Claire asked. "What are they reporting? Our progress? Our status? Our failures?" Adira shrugged. "Or maybe they're sending us orders." The thought chilled them all. It was no longer just a station with secrets. It was a node in a larger network, part of an unseen system that manipulated their every move. To complicate matters, the psychological effects of isolation and suspicion were beginning to show. Crew members whispered in corners, watched each other with narrowed eyes, and avoided conversations that might lead too close to the truth. Even Yuri, usually steady and stoic, had grown distant, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd like a man who knew the battlefield but was unsure which side he was on. One morning, Claire caught Yuri outside the medical bay, staring at a holoscreen displaying station schematics. "What are you looking for?" she asked. He turned slowly, his face tight. "I'm trying to find any record of Sovereign One in the medical logs. If it's real, someone on board should have accessed it. Any luck?" "Nothing official. But there are anomalies. Medical incidents with no reported cause. Sudden symptoms. Psych evaluations wiped or altered." Claire's breath caught. "You think it's linked?" "I don't know what I think anymore. But I do know this place is hiding more than it's letting on." The unease pushed Claire deeper into her work. She started digging into personal records, cross-referencing access logs with unusual health reports, hoping to find a pattern. Each discovery felt like a small victory, a deleted entry here, a suppressed video feed there, a masked calm conversation about containment protocols. The deeper she went, the more she realized how much of Halcyon's official story was a carefully crafted lie. Late one night, alone in her quarters, Claire received a message on her private channel. No sender ID, no encryption, just a single line, meet me at the old Pathfinder node. Midnight. Come alone. Her heart raced. She debated ignoring it, but curiosity and desperation won. At midnight, she floated to the designated location, a part of the station rarely used since the upgrade, dark and cold, with exposed wiring and panels that hummed softly. As she approached, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Claire, the voice was low, familiar but strained. It was Reeves. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you, she replied. Why the warning? He hesitated, then said, because you need to know the truth before it's too late. I already know half of it. Reeves looked around nervously. Not everything. Sovereign One wasn't just a project for survival. It was designed to select the future of humanity. Musk's vision, he believed the Earth was doomed, but he also believed in control. The station's purpose is not just to preserve life, but to decide whose life is preserved. You mean like a gatekeeper? Claire asked, incredulous. Exactly. The AI, the surveillance, the psychological profiling, it's all part of an algorithm that judges who is worthy. And who decides the criteria? The algorithm. But the initial parameters were set by a council, people Musk trusted. And some of them are still on board. Claire's mind reeled. The station was a floating city, yes, but it was also a cage where their fate was being calculated and weighed. What can we do? Expose it, Reeves said. Tell the crew. Break the algorithm. They won't listen. Not at first. But if enough of us question it, we might disrupt the system. Claire floated back to her quarters, the weight of Reeves' words pressing on her like gravity. She knew the truth was dangerous, but silence was worse. That night, she drafted a message to the entire crew, careful to avoid detection by automated filters. It was a call for transparency, a plea for unity, a reminder that they were more than data points to be judged. Before sending, she paused and asked herself, what was the one thing that always pushed her forward, even when things got tough? The answer was clear, hope. Because without hope, what was the point of surviving at all? She hit send. The message rippled through the station's comms like a stone cast into a still pond, stirring waves of doubt, fear, and for some, determination. The quiet waiting shattered. Conversations sparked in every module, alliances formed, and the question hung in the air. Could they reclaim their future from an algorithm that had already decided their worth? Outside the window, Earth continued its silent spin, fragile and beautiful, and Halcyon floated on the knife's edge between control and freedom, between survival and sacrifice. The real journey was just beginning. The aftermath of Claire's message was immediate and undeniable. It spread across Halcyon faster than anyone had anticipated, rippling through the tightly controlled communication channels like a silent rebellion. Conversations that had once been whispered in shadowed corners now echoed openly through the station's corridors, a chaotic chorus of doubt and defiance. For the first time in weeks, the crew looked at one another not just as colleagues or survivors, but as potential allies, or threats. The station's usual hum of routine maintenance and scientific exploration was replaced with an electric tension, palpable in the charged glances, the hurried footsteps, and the unspoken fear lurking behind every smile. Reeves, once a figure of authority and silence, found himself isolated. The council members he represented were watching closely, and so was the algorithm. The AI, always present but rarely seen, began to adjust its behavior. Surveillance cameras shifted their focus, sensors scanned more frequently, and automated messages reminding crew members of duty and protocol grew in volume. Claire noticed it first during her daily system checks, a subtle increase in network traffic, strange spikes in data flow, and encrypted packets bouncing around the station's central spine. It was as if Sovereign One itself was awakening, tightening its grip. That morning, she met with Sam and Adira in the central hub, a place now crowded with murmuring crew members exchanging theories and plans. "We're being watched more closely," Claire said, her voice low. "The AI is reacting." Sam nodded grimly. "They've activated countermeasures. We need to move fast before they lock us out completely." Adira pulled up a holographic map of the station, highlighting critical nodes and data centers. "If we can reach the AI core, we might be able to override the surveillance protocols." Claire's heart pounded. "Do we have the clearance?" "No. But we have something better, the element of surprise." They began planning a covert operation to infiltrate the AI core, a section of Halcyon that was heavily guarded both physically and digitally. Access was restricted to council members and select engineers, making their mission a dangerous gamble. Over the next 48 hours, Claire, Sam, and Adira worked to recruit allies. Engineers tired of secrets, scientists hungry for truth, and even some security personnel who had grown uneasy with the escalating control. Trust was fragile, and every meeting felt like a test. Meanwhile, the AI's presence loomed large. Automated patrol drones increased their sweeps, and biometric scans became more frequent. Crew members reported glitches in personal devices, unexplained lockdowns of certain sectors, and sudden overrides of manual controls. Tensions boiled over one afternoon when a group of engineers attempted to access restricted files and were forcibly detained by security bots. Rumors spread of disappearances, of psychological evaluations that turned into forced isolations. Claire felt the weight of these events crushing down on her resolve. The floating city was no longer a sanctuary, it was a prison with invisible bars. On the night of their planned operation, the crew gathered in a hidden maintenance tunnel beneath Sector 7, a place where the station's veins of power and data converged. Claire looked at the faces around her, each one marked by fear, determination, and exhaustion. "This is more than a mission," she said. "It's a chance to take back control of our lives." Sam double-checked the hacked access codes they'd secured. "We have 10 minutes before the AI flags our movement." Adira loaded the override scripts onto portable drives. "Once inside the core, we'll have limited time to shut down surveillance and expose the truth." They moved silently through the shadows, avoiding patrols and camera sweeps with the precision of seasoned spies. Every step felt like walking on a knife's edge, every breath measured against the possibility of detection. When they reached the AI core's entrance, a massive door embedded with biometric locks and encryption panels, Claire's fingers trembled as she input the stolen codes. The door hissed open, revealing a cavernous room filled with servers and glowing data streams, a digital heart beating steadily beneath the station's metal skin. Inside, the AI's presence was overwhelming. The screens flickered with streams of code, faces of crew members monitored in real time, their psychological profiles scrolling endlessly. Claire felt as if the station was alive, watching her, judging her. Sam connected the drives to the main console, launching the override sequence. Alarms blared instantly, silent to them but triggering emergency protocols throughout Halcyon. The AI fought back with digital ferocity, scrambling defenses, locking systems, and deploying countermeasures. "We've got 5 minutes." Sam shouted. Claire and Adira worked frantically, bypassing firewalls and decrypting data. Then, a shock. A burst of images on the screens, faces of missing crew, suppressed messages, orders from the council, and chilling psychological assessments. The algorithm's cold logic was laid bare, a system designed to cull, to choose, to preserve only the fit. Tears blurred Claire's vision as she realized the depth of the betrayal. But there was hope too, files detailing attempts by some council members to sabotage the system from within, secret communications between rebels, plans for a new future beyond control. With a final keystroke, the surveillance protocols shut down. Cameras froze, sensors dimmed, and the AI's omnipresent gaze blinked out. The station fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of those inside the core. Outside, the crew sensed the change immediately. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by cautious relief. But the battle was far from over. Reeves' voice crackled over the comms, cold and warning. You have disabled critical systems. This is an act of rebellion. Consequences will follow. Claire replied with steady resolve. We are not your subjects. Halcyon belongs to everyone aboard. We choose transparency, not control. The network had been shaken, the truth revealed. But Sovereign One was still alive, still waiting. And somewhere, beyond the station's orbit, the silent watchers prepared their next move. After the AI shutdown, Halcyon's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The crew, once muted and compliant, now buzzed with whispers of revolution and defiance. The digital chains that had kept them monitored and controlled were broken, but the scars remained, etched deep into every corner of the station and the minds of its inhabitants. Claire, Sam, and Adira found themselves thrust into unexpected leadership roles, guiding a fractured but determined community toward a future they'd never truly believed possible. Yet, freedom was no simple gift. Without Sovereign One's algorithms directing every decision, chaos flared. Essential systems faltered as automated protocols halted, and old rivalries surfaced amid the power vacuum. The station's fragile balance teetered on the edge. One of the earliest challenges came from the resource management sector. Without AI-calculated rationing, supplies risked depletion. Food production modules, already stressed by fluctuating conditions, began to fail as inexperienced crews attempted manual oversight. Tensions flared as accusations flew, with some blaming the rebels for the disruption, and others condemning the council for the original deception. Claire spent long hours mediating disputes, her resolve tested by exhaustion and doubt. At the same time, new questions emerged. The encrypted transmissions Claire had discovered before the shutdown hadn't stopped. Instead, they increased in frequency and complexity, hinting at a larger network outside Halcyon's orbit, an interconnected web of stations, satellites, and possibly Earth-based command centers still engaged in shadow operations. Adira's contacts confirmed this. We're not alone, she said during a tense meeting in the hydroponics bay, the glowing plants casting eerie shadows on her determined face. There's a network controlling multiple habitats, all under the same surveillance system. Then shutting down Sovereign One here is just the first step, Claire concluded. We need to reach out, find allies. Their efforts to broadcast a signal beyond Halcyon's secure channels led to a breakthrough. Using a repurposed communication array, they managed to send a message coded with their story, a call for transparency and cooperation, a beacon of rebellion cast into the void. Days passed with no response, and morale waned. Doubts crept in. Was Halcyon truly isolated? Was the rebellion a futile gesture against a vast and unyielding system? Then, the station's sensors picked up an anomaly. A small vessel, unregistered and traveling at an unusual trajectory, approached Halcyon's orbit. The crew gathered in observation decks, watching as the sleek ship drew nearer, a symbol of hope or harbinger of danger. The vessel docked under strict security protocols, and from its hatch emerged a delegation bearing credentials from the Lunar Research Consortium, an organization reputed for its independent stance and commitment to transparency. Their leader, Dr. Elena Vargas, explained their mission, to evaluate the impact of Sovereign One surveillance on off-world colonies and to explore partnerships for governance reform. We've been monitoring your situation, Vargas said, eyes steady and resolute. What you've done here is remarkable. It signals a turning point for space habitats everywhere. The alliance sparked renewed energy. Scientists, engineers, and activists from Halcyon and the consortium began sharing data, pooling resources, and drafting a charter for democratic governance in orbit. But not everyone welcomed the newcomers. Loyalists to the council and covert agents embedded within Halcyon viewed the alliance as a threat, escalating sabotage attempts and misinformation campaigns. Claire found herself navigating a complex web of trust and betrayal. Meanwhile, the personal toll of rebellion weighed heavily. Sam confessed his fears one evening in the quiet of the observatory, staring out at the vastness of space. "What if we're trading one form of control for another?" he asked. "If we dismantle the old system, how do we ensure the new one isn't just as oppressive?" Claire didn't have an answer, but she understood the question. The station was a microcosm of humanity's eternal struggle, for freedom, for security, for meaning in the void. As negotiations with the Lunar Consortium progressed, mysterious power fluctuations threatened to destabilize Halcyon's orbit. Engineers worked tirelessly to stabilize the station, suspecting sabotage from hidden council loyalists. The station's fragile existence hung in the balance. In response, Claire proposed a bold plan, to establish a network of autonomous stations, each governed by transparent protocols and accountable councils, linked by open communication channels free from AI control. It was a vision both daring and daunting, a blueprint for a new era in human space habitation. The plan faced fierce opposition from conservative factions and skepticism from the weary crew. But with Dr. Varga's support and growing public backing, momentum built. As Halcyon prepared to become the flagship of this new network, Claire reflected on the journey, the lost trust, the fractured relationships, the hard-won moments of hope. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time, the crew believed their destiny was theirs to shape. Outside the station, Earth hung in the sky, a fragile blue marble watched by those who had escaped its confines, determined to build a future not dictated by algorithms but by the messy, beautiful complexity of human choice. The lines in the void were being redrawn, and Claire knew their story was only just beginning. The fragile peace that had settled over Halcyon was deceptive. Beneath the surface, old wounds festered and new divisions grew sharper, threatening to tear apart the community that Claire, Sam, Adira, and their allies had fought so hard to unite. The arrival of the Lunar Research Consortium had brought fresh hope, but also new challenges. Different visions for the future clashed, some favoring cautious reform, others demanding radical overhaul. In the station's narrow corridors, heated debates ignited, alliances formed and dissolved, and trust became a precious but scarce commodity. Claire felt the strain deeply. As a leader thrust into an uncertain role, she struggled to hold the disparate factions together, to balance transparency with security, and to prevent the past from repeating itself. One morning, the crisis erupted. The station's food production modules suffered a severe malfunction, caused by a deliberate sabotage that cut power to critical nutrient pumps. Hydroponic gardens withered, threatening the delicate balance of resources. Panic rippled through the crew. Fingers pointed. "This is the work of loyalists," Adira insisted during an emergency assembly. "They want to destabilize the station, to force us back under the old regime." Sam, always the voice of caution, urged restraint. "We need to find the saboteurs before we fracture completely. Accusations without proof will only deepen divisions." Claire convened a task force, blending engineers, security, and trusted volunteers, to investigate. The search was arduous, uncovering a tangled web of secrets and motives. Suspicion fell on a few crew members with ties to the council, but evidence was elusive. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Vargas worked closely with Claire to reinforce the station's systems, deploying new protocols to prevent future attacks. Their collaboration deepened trust between Halcyon and the consortium, but also drew envy and resentment from some factions. One night, Claire received an encrypted message from an anonymous source claiming knowledge of a conspiracy within the station, a plan to assassinate key leaders and seize control by force. The warning came with detailed schematics of the station's vulnerabilities and a call for immediate action. She debated sharing it with the Council of Leaders but feared the risk of leaking sensitive information. Instead, Claire, Sam, and Adira organized a covert security sweep, focusing on critical areas and monitoring unusual activities. The tension was suffocating. Every shadow seemed to harbor danger, every friendly face a potential traitor. Then, during a routine inspection of the ventilation shafts, a security team discovered hidden compartments containing weapons and encrypted communication devices. The scale of the conspiracy was far greater than they'd imagined. The saboteurs were organized, well-equipped, and prepared to strike. Faced with this threat, Claire called for a public assembly, revealing the conspiracy and appealing for unity. Her words resonated deeply: "We must not let fear divide us. Our strength lies in our shared humanity, in the choices we make now to build a better future." The assembly sparked a wave of solidarity. Crews who had been suspicious began working together, securing vital systems and forming neighborhood watches throughout the station. However, the danger was far from over. One evening, during a power reroute, an explosion rocked a critical junction, causing a temporary loss of gravity in several modules and injuring several crew members. The attack was precise and brutal, a stark reminder of the stakes at hand. As medics rushed to aid the wounded, Claire felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. She realized that the rebellion's fight was not only against a controlling AI or a secretive council but against the very human capacity for fear and violence. In the aftermath, alliances shifted. Some conspirators surrendered, others fled into the labyrinthine bowels of the station. Trust was shattered but also forged anew in the crucible of crisis. Claire and Adira intensified efforts to build transparent governance structures, incorporating feedback from all sectors of the station. Sam focused on security reforms, training volunteers and deploying surveillance tools that respected privacy but ensured safety. Meanwhile, the Lunar Consortium offered resources and expertise, helping to stabilize critical systems and provide psychological support to traumatized crew members. In quieter moments, Claire found herself reflecting on the journey, the cost of leadership, the fragility of peace, and the resilience of hope. She remembered the line she had once asked herself: what was the one thing that always pushed her forward? Now, it was not just hope but also the profound responsibility to others, to protect, to listen, to guide. Outside Halcyon's windows, Earth rotated silently, a reminder of what was at stake and what could be lost. The floating city was more than a station, it was a symbol of human possibility and vulnerability. As new protocols were written, committees formed, and daily life slowly returned to a new normal, Claire understood that the path ahead would be long and uncertain. But it would be theirs to choose, forged in the hard-won light of freedom and the enduring promise of connection. The fractures remained, but so did the alliances, fragile, imperfect, and human. Despite the fragile calm that had settled over Halcyon, the shadows lurking beneath the surface grew deeper and more dangerous. The sabotage and conspiracy revealed earlier were only symptoms of a larger, more insidious threat, one that reached far beyond the station's corridors and into the very systems controlling humanity's expansion into space. Claire had hoped the alliance with the Lunar Research Consortium would bring stability, yet tensions between factions continued to simmer. Some crew members whispered about external agents working to undermine their efforts, while others feared the return of the Council's influence in disguise. The psychological strain on the community was palpable. Sleep became elusive for many, dreams were haunted by the cold algorithms of Sovereign One and the ever-watchful eyes of unknown watchers. Claire herself wrestled with the burden of leadership, caught between the demands of transparency and the necessity of secrecy. One morning, a critical system malfunction sent a shockwave through the station. The central power grid flickered violently, causing brief but widespread blackouts. Emergency protocols activated automatically, but the event exposed a vulnerability, one that could be exploited at any moment. Investigations pointed toward a cyber attack, sophisticated and targeted, designed to destabilize Halcyon's infrastructure. It was a chilling reminder that their fight was not just physical but digital, fought in the invisible battlegrounds of code and signal. The station's engineers worked around the clock, patching firewalls and fortifying defenses, but the attackers were relentless. Meanwhile, rumors circulated of a shadow faction within Halcyon itself, individuals with unknown loyalties and unclear motives, who seemed to thrive in the chaos. Claire and her closest allies grew increasingly cautious. Meetings became more secretive, plans more guarded. The station's once open forums gave way to controlled discussions behind encrypted channels. In this climate of fear and suspicion, Claire reached out to Dr. Elena Vargas, whose experience with interstellar governance and security proved invaluable. Together, they devised a plan to establish a decentralized command network, one that distributed control across multiple nodes to prevent any single point of failure or takeover. It was a radical shift from the centralized AI-driven system they had dismantled, and it required a new level of cooperation and trust among the crew. Implementing the network was a massive undertaking, fraught with technical challenges and political hurdles. Some crew members resisted, fearing loss of control or the rise of new power brokers. Others embraced it as the only path forward. The process forced Claire to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, power, and the delicate balance between freedom and security. In parallel, personal lives on Halcyon continued to unfold with quiet drama. Claire found moments of solace in conversations with Sam, whose steadfastness and insight anchored her in turbulent times. Their friendship deepened, blending professional respect with the unspoken recognition of shared trauma and hope. Adira, ever the pragmatist, threw herself into engineering challenges, finding purpose in solving the station's technical puzzles. Yet even she was not immune to the psychological toll. One evening, Claire received a distressing report. A small group of crew members had vanished from their quarters without explanation. Security footage showed nothing conclusive, only flickering static and abrupt system resets. The disappearances sparked fear of abductions or defections, raising questions about loyalty and safety. Claire authorized a thorough investigation, but answers were scarce. The station's closed environment amplified every rumor, every whisper of conspiracy. Amid this turmoil, a surprising breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter, a young technician named Malik, who discovered an anomaly in the AI's residual code buried deep within Halcyon systems. It appeared to be a dormant backdoor, a hidden pathway that could either be a vulnerability or a tool. Claire and Adira debated the risks and rewards of accessing it. Ultimately, they decided to use Malik's find to their advantage, cautiously activating the backdoor to gather intelligence on external threats and internal saboteurs. The information revealed a complex web of surveillance and manipulation extending far beyond Halcyon, implicating powerful corporate interests and shadow governments on Earth. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. The rebellion was not just about reclaiming control over a station, it was a fight against a system designed to exploit humanity's reach into space. Faced with this daunting reality, Claire rallied her allies for a new phase of resistance, one that would require strategic alliances, bold actions, and unwavering resolve. As Halcyon prepared for this next chapter, Claire stood at the observation deck, gazing at the distant Earth, a blue and green orb shining silently in the void. She reflected on the journey so far, the betrayals, the sacrifices, the fragile victories. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The floating city was more than a habitat, it was a beacon of human resilience and defiance. And no matter the shadows that sought to envelop it, the crew of Halcyon would fight to keep their light alive. With the revelation of the sprawling surveillance web extending beyond Halcyon, Claire and her closest allies understood that their struggle was no longer confined to a single station. The rebellion against Sovereign One had to evolve into a movement that connected all the human habitats scattered across Earth's orbit and beyond. The first step was to establish a secure and resilient communication network, one that could resist interference from corporate and government forces seeking to maintain control through hidden backdoors and AI oversight. Claire tasked Malik, the young technician who had uncovered the AI's residual code, with leading the design of this decentralized network. Malik's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon a small but dedicated team formed, working in secret to develop encryption protocols and relay nodes that could link stations and ships throughout near-Earth space. The challenges were immense: limited bandwidth, signal delays, the risk of detection and shutdown by hostile actors. Yet progress was steady. Parallel to these technical efforts, Claire worked tirelessly to build trust and cooperation among the disparate communities orbiting Earth. She leveraged the alliance with the Lunar Research Consortium, whose influence reached several stations and scientific outposts, to spread the vision of a democratic, transparent governance model. The message resonated with many crews weary of isolation and control. Slowly, representatives from various habitats began to respond to Claire's call, eager to join a collective that valued autonomy and shared responsibility. Meetings were held in virtual spaces, encrypted and shielded from prying eyes, where ideas were exchanged, strategies debated, and a common charter drafted. Yet, not all stations were receptive. Some remained loyal to Earth-based authorities or corporate sponsors, suspicious of the rebellion's motives. Others feared the instability that rapid change might bring. These divisions reflected the complex tapestry of humanity's expansion into space, a mix of idealism, pragmatism, and self-interest. Meanwhile, within Halcyon, the crew adapted to the new reality of being the movement's heart. Daily life balanced between routine tasks and the weighty responsibilities of leadership. Security remained a constant concern, with teams vigilantly monitoring for threats both internal and external. Training programs prepared volunteers to defend the station if necessary. Claire found herself navigating diplomatic challenges as well, mediating disputes and ensuring that the station's governance reflected the diversity and voices of its inhabitants. Personal relationships deepened and frayed under the pressure. Sam and Claire's bond grew stronger, a source of comfort and stability amid uncertainty. Adira's focus on engineering breakthroughs often masked her inner struggles with the psychological toll of conflict. The network's growth was punctuated by moments of triumph and setback. A key victory came when a scientific outpost near the Earth-Moon Lagrange point joined the alliance, bringing valuable resources and strategic position. The event was celebrated as proof that unity was possible despite distance and difference. Yet, a devastating cyber attack soon followed, targeting the newly integrated node and temporarily severing communications. The attackers, unknown but suspected to be agents of Earth's corporate conglomerates, demonstrated their willingness to escalate the conflict. In response, the alliance strengthened its defenses, sharing intelligence and resources to harden systems against future incursions. The digital war mirrored the physical and psychological battles waging across habitats. During this turbulent period, Claire was approached by an enigmatic figure calling herself Mira, a former intelligence analyst with connections to Earth's shadow networks. Mira offered valuable information about the conglomerate's strategies and vulnerabilities, but her true motives were unclear. Trusting her was a gamble, but Claire recognized the necessity of every possible ally. Together, they uncovered plans for a coordinated strike aimed at reclaiming control over the floating cities, potentially triggering widespread chaos. The alliance had to act swiftly to counter the threat. Mobilizing the network, they coordinated defensive measures and launched a campaign of strategic disruption against the conglomerate's assets in orbit and on Earth. The conflict escalated into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, played out across space and cyberspace. Throughout, Claire remained a beacon of resilience, inspiring her community with unwavering determination. She often reminded them that their struggle was not merely about power or control, but about the fundamental right to self-determination and the human capacity to build a better future in the stars. As the network expanded and the resistance grew stronger, the dream of a new era of space habitation, one defined by freedom, cooperation, and hope, felt increasingly within reach. Yet, Claire knew the path forward would be fraught with sacrifice and uncertainty. The floating city was no longer just Halcyon. It was a movement that could reshape humanity's destiny among the stars. The battle for control over humanity's future in orbit had shifted into a new phase, with the Alliance's expanding network striking a nerve in the corridors of power back on Earth and within corporate boardrooms cloaked in secrecy. For Claire and her team aboard Halcyon, the stakes had never been higher. Every decision carried weight not only for the station's survival but for the broader vision of a free, self-governing community in space. The first sign that their efforts were making an impact came when a wave of defections shook the corporate-controlled outposts. Crew members, inspired by the ideals and successes of the Alliance, began to question their loyalties and reach out for support. Quietly, stations once aligned with Earth's conglomerate severed ties and sought to join the network. This momentum bolstered morale and expanded the Alliance's reach, creating a patchwork of communities united by a shared purpose. However, the conglomerates were far from defeated. In retaliation, they escalated their tactics, launching coordinated sabotage missions and cyber attacks aimed at crippling the Alliance's communication nodes and resource supplies. Halcyon itself became a prime target. One night, an explosion rocked one of the station's key propulsion modules, damaging the delicate systems that maintained its orbit. Emergency protocols kicked in as engineers scrambled to stabilize the situation. The attack was a clear message: the fight for control was brutal and unrelenting. Amid the chaos, Claire and her leadership team worked tirelessly to manage the crisis, coordinating repairs and rallying the crew. The strain tested their resolve but also strengthened their bonds. Sam, who had grown into a trusted advisor and pillar of support, coordinated the station's defense strategies, while Adira led engineering teams through grueling repairs, pushing systems beyond their limits to restore functionality. The incident underscored the vulnerability of the floating cities, but also the resilience of their inhabitants. In the aftermath, the Alliance convened an emergency summit, bringing together representatives from all allied habitats in orbit. Held through secure channels, the summit was both a moment of solidarity and a crucible for difficult decisions. Debates flared over how aggressively to respond to the conglomerate's attacks, weighing the risks of escalation against the necessity of defense. Claire advocated for a balanced approach: our strength lies in unity and purpose, not in replicating the violence we oppose. But we cannot be passive in the face of threats. The summit concluded with a renewed commitment to mutual support and the establishment of rapid response teams capable of protecting key infrastructure and personnel. Meanwhile, Claire pursued diplomacy beyond orbit, reaching out to Earth-based activist groups, sympathetic politicians, and independent media outlets. She understood that the rebellion's survival depended on winning hearts and minds on Earth, exposing the conglomerate's oppressive tactics, and inspiring a broader movement for change. These efforts were not without risk. Surveillance intensified, and attempts were made to discredit Claire and her allies, painting them as radicals or terrorists. Yet the growing tide of public awareness and support provided a shield against the worst attacks. As months passed, the Alliance grew stronger and more organized. New habitats joined, bringing diverse perspectives and skills. Cultural exchanges blossomed through virtual forums, fostering empathy and collaboration across vast distances. Halcyon evolved from a lone rebel outpost into the vibrant heart of a new spacefaring society. But with growth came complexity. Conflicts arose over resource allocation, governance structures, and strategic priorities. Claire's leadership was tested as she navigated these challenges, striving to maintain balance between inclusivity and efficiency. Personal sacrifices weighed heavily as well. The relentless pace and pressure strained relationships and health. Claire often found herself alone in the observation deck late at night, gazing at the distant Earth and reflecting on the journey. The path was uncertain, the future uncharted, but the flickering lights of the floating cities below were beacons of hope, a testament to human resilience and the enduring dream of freedom beyond the confines of Earth. Then, a breakthrough arrived in the form of an unexpected ally, a former executive from one of the conglomerates, disillusioned by the corruption and cruelty she had witnessed. Her defection brought insider knowledge that exposed weaknesses in the corporate networks and opened doors for negotiations. With this advantage, the Alliance launched a bold campaign of strategic strikes, targeting supply lines, communications, and propaganda channels, aimed at weakening the conglomerate's grip without endangering civilians. The campaign was risky but effective, shifting the balance of power. As the tides turned, Claire's vision of a self-governing network of floating cities began to materialize, a living symbol of humanity's capacity to overcome division and control. Yet, even as victories mounted, Claire knew the ultimate test lay ahead, the question of whether this new society could sustain itself, rooted in principles of freedom, cooperation, and hope, amid the vast and unforgiving expanse of space. The turning point in the rebellion was not marked by a single victory or defeat, but by the slow and deliberate process of building something new from the ashes of conflict. Halcyon and its allied stations had survived sabotage, espionage, and political warfare, but the real challenge was now to create a sustainable society, one that could endure beyond crises and reflect the ideals for which they had fought. Claire understood this better than anyone. The exhilaration of resistance was giving way to the painstaking work of governance, infrastructure, and culture. The Alliance's leaders convened regularly, drafting a charter that balanced individual freedoms with communal responsibility. They debated fiercely over representation, resource sharing, and dispute resolution, seeking a system that would not replicate the hierarchies and control they had rejected. Central to this new social contract was transparency. Claire insisted that all decisions be made openly, with mechanisms for accountability and feedback. Technology was a double-edged sword, capable of enabling surveillance and control but also of fostering connection and participation. The network's decentralized communication platform became a vital tool for democracy, allowing voices from all habitats to be heard, proposals to be debated, and policies to be refined collectively. Education emerged as another cornerstone. Recognizing that knowledge was key to empowerment, the Alliance established learning hubs both virtual and physical. These centers offered courses in governance, engineering, medicine, and ethics, accessible to all crew members regardless of background. Mentorship programs paired experienced leaders with newcomers, ensuring the transfer of skills and values. Claire found herself mentoring many young activists and technicians, sharing lessons from her journey, both the triumphs and the mistakes. At the same time, cultural initiatives flourished. Art, music, and storytelling became mediums for healing and unity. Festivals celebrating the diverse origins of the Alliance's members provided moments of joy and reflection, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. The floating cities, once symbols of isolation and conflict, transformed into vibrant communities where cooperation and creativity thrived. Yet, the path was far from smooth. Resource scarcity remained a pressing issue. Life support systems, energy production, and food cultivation demanded constant innovation and careful management. The Alliance invested heavily in research, pooling expertise from across habitats to develop sustainable technologies. Breakthroughs in hydroponics, recycling, and energy efficiency offered hope, but every advance came with new challenges. Political tensions lingered as well. Differences in priorities and vision sometimes threatened cohesion. Some factions pushed for rapid expansion and economic development, while others cautioned restraint and ecological stewardship. Claire's role was often that of mediator, striving to keep the Alliance united through dialogue and compromise. Personal tolls also became apparent. The intensity of leadership weighed on Claire and her closest companions. Moments of doubt and exhaustion surfaced, but the support of the community and the conviction in their cause sustained them. Meanwhile, the external world watched closely. Earth's governments and corporations remained wary, some attempting to engage diplomatically, others continuing covert attempts to undermine the Alliance. Claire welcomed dialogue but remained vigilant, aware that trust had to be earned and maintained. In this complex landscape, the Alliance's vision evolved into something more ambitious, a federation of floating cities committed to mutual aid, innovation, and peaceful coexistence. Plans were drawn for new habitats, connected by trade routes and communication links, expanding humanity's footprint in space with respect and care. One of the most profound moments came when the Alliance organized a summit aboard Halcyon, inviting representatives from all allied habitats to sign the charter and formalize their commitment. The event was broadcast across the network, watched by thousands in orbit and on Earth. Claire delivered the keynote, her voice steady and resolute. "We are the architects of our destiny. In this vast frontier, we choose freedom, cooperation, and hope. Our floating cities are not just places, they are living testaments to what humanity can achieve when we stand together." The signing was met with cheers and tears. It marked a new chapter, a foundation upon which to build a future worthy of the sacrifices made. As celebrations faded, Claire retreated to the observation deck once more, gazing at the distant Earth. The blue planet shimmered with possibility and peril alike. The floating cities were no longer just refuges, they were beacons, lighting the way toward a new era of human potential beyond the constraints of old systems. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time, Claire felt a profound sense of peace. They had laid the foundations of freedom. Not just in code and policy, but in the hearts and minds of a community determined to chart its own course among the stars. As the alliance of floating cities flourished in orbit, the distant blue orb below remained a source of both inspiration and conflict. Earth, with its sprawling metropolises and fractured politics, was never far from the minds of those who had taken refuge beyond its atmosphere. For Claire and the leadership of the alliance, maintaining a connection with Earth was essential, not only to foster understanding and cooperation but also to confront the forces that threatened their autonomy. The first signs of a thaw in relations came through grassroots movements and independent media channels on Earth, where activists and journalists began to tell the story of the floating cities in orbit, not as rebellious outposts but as pioneers of a new kind of society. These narratives struck a chord with many, especially younger generations disillusioned with Earth's entrenched systems of power and inequality. Claire seized the opportunity to engage more openly, organizing virtual town halls and cultural exchanges that bridged the vast distance. These forums became spaces of dialogue, where questions of governance, environment, and shared humanity were explored. Yet, beneath this hopeful exchange, tension simmered. Powerful entities on Earth, corporations and governments wary of losing control, continued to plot ways to reassert dominance. Espionage and sabotage attempts persisted, as did propaganda campaigns aimed at discrediting the alliance. Claire's leadership was tested as she balanced openness with security, transparency with caution. A turning point arrived when a delegation from Earth's United Space Coalition requested formal recognition and dialogue with the alliance. The coalition was a fragile amalgam of Earth's governments and private interests, seeking to stabilize space governance but still deeply divided in approach. Claire recognized the potential benefits of engagement but insisted on terms that respected the alliance's sovereignty and principles. Negotiations were complex and protracted. The coalition's representatives pushed for oversight mechanisms that many in the alliance feared would undermine their hard-won autonomy. In response, Claire and her allies proposed a model of cooperative governance, one based on mutual respect, shared goals, and clear boundaries. The dialogue, though fraught, opened new avenues for cooperation in science, environmental monitoring, and resource management. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the alliance's story inspired new activism. Communities demanded reforms and transparency from their own governments, fueled by the example of the floating cities. This ripple effect gave hope that change was possible not just in orbit but on the planet itself. Yet, the realities of Earth's challenges, the climate crisis, political polarization, and economic disparity, remained daunting. The alliance understood that its success could not be isolated from Earth's fate. Throughout this period, Claire reflected deeply on the dual nature of their existence, caught between the vastness of space and the roots of humanity on Earth. The floating cities were homes, laboratories, and beacons, but also reminders of what had been left behind. Personal letters and messages flowed between orbit and Earth, weaving a tapestry of connection that transcended distance. As new generations grew up in orbit, born into the ideals and struggles of the alliance, questions about identity and belonging emerged. What did it mean to be human in space? How could they honor Earth's legacy while forging a distinct future? These questions sparked vibrant cultural dialogues, shaping art, philosophy, and community life. In one poignant moment, a group of young artists aboard Halcyon organized a multimedia exhibition titled Echoes from Earth, blending imagery, sound, and storytelling to explore the complex relationship between the planet below and the space above. The exhibit touched hearts across habitats, reminding all that their journey was part of a larger human story. As negotiations with the United Space Coalition progressed, the Alliance also faced practical challenges of expansion. New habitats required resources, expertise, and infrastructure. The balance between rapid growth and sustainable development became a central theme. Claire advocated for cautious optimism, embracing innovation while honoring ecological limits. The Alliance invested in pioneering technologies for energy generation, waste recycling, and agriculture, drawing on the collective genius of its members. In this era of creation and connection, Claire found renewed purpose. The struggles of the past had forged a resilient community ready to face the future. Though threats remained, the floating cities had become more than refuges, they were living embodiments of hope, proving that humanity could choose a different path. As she looked out once more from Halcyon's observation deck, the Earth hung serene and fragile in the void, a reminder that their fates were intertwined. The echoes from Earth would continue to shape their journey, but so too would the light they carried into the infinite darkness of space. The alliance of floating cities had reached a critical juncture where trust, between individuals, communities, and even factions within their own movement, became as vital as oxygen itself. Despite the progress made in building a new society, old fears and uncertainties lingered, threatening to unravel the delicate fabric they had woven. Claire felt the weight of this tension every day. The recent expansion of the network brought not only fresh energy and ideas but also new complexities and fractures. Some habitats, newly joined to the alliance, brought with them different customs, priorities, and histories that sometimes clashed with established norms aboard Halcyon. Misunderstandings arose over resource allocation, decision-making authority, and cultural practices. In one particularly heated council meeting, representatives debated fiercely over mining rights for an asteroid belt nearby, with accusations flying about exploitation and inequity. Claire stepped in, reminding all that their strength lay in solidarity, not division. But the wounds cut deep. Meanwhile, security concerns heightened. There were whispers of sabotage within the alliance, signs that infiltrators or discontented members sought to undermine their efforts from within. Paranoia crept into daily life, with increased surveillance and background checks that some argued compromised the openness they had fought to establish. Claire struggled to balance vigilance with trust, knowing that overreach could fracture the community just as surely as betrayal. In the midst of this unrest, Mira, the enigmatic intelligence analyst who had once helped uncover threats to the alliance, warned Claire of an imminent plot from a shadow faction loyal to Earth's corporate powers. This faction aimed to infiltrate key leadership positions, sow discord, and destabilize the Federation before a coordinated strike to reclaim orbit. The revelation was chilling but also galvanizing. Claire convened a covert task force to investigate and counteract the threat. The team worked in secrecy, relying on a network of trusted informants and advanced AI monitoring tools developed by Adira's engineering teams. The hunt for infiltrators was tense and exhausting, with false alarms and near misses. Trust was both weapon and vulnerability. On a personal level, Claire's relationship with Sam was tested. The pressure of leadership and the growing paranoia strained their bond. Sam advocated for increased security measures, while Claire worried about eroding the community's spirit. Their disagreements brought moments of distance and reflection. Yet, their commitment to each other and the cause remained unbroken. As weeks passed, the task force uncovered a web of deception, a group of operatives posing as alliance members, feeding false information and fomenting unrest. The exposure led to arrests and a purge of compromised elements, but not without collateral damage. Some innocent members were caught in suspicion's crossfire, deepening feelings of betrayal and loss. The alliance faced a reckoning: how to heal wounds without sacrificing security. Public forums opened for dialogue, where fears and frustrations were aired honestly. Leaders emphasized transparency and reaffirmed the alliance's values of inclusion and justice. Slowly, trust was rebuilt through consistent actions and open communication. In this turbulent time, Claire leaned heavily on her inner circle, including Adira, whose technical prowess and calm presence were invaluable, and Mira, whose ambiguous past made her insights both vital and controversial. Their combined strengths helped steer the alliance through the storm. Beyond internal struggles, external pressures loomed large. Earth's corporate factions, though weakened, continued covert campaigns to destabilize the Federation. Cyber attacks, propaganda, and economic blockades tested the alliance's resilience. In response, Claire and her leadership sought to strengthen alliances not only within orbit but with sympathetic entities on Earth and beyond, scientists, human rights advocates, and independent states eager for a new model of governance. Throughout these trials, the core message persisted: the alliance was more than a political entity, it was a testament to humanity's capacity for growth, forgiveness, and hope. The floating cities were not perfect, but their willingness to confront challenges openly was their greatest strength. In quiet moments, Claire reflected on how far they had come, from isolated survivors to architects of a new civilization. The trials of trust were painful but necessary. They revealed the fragility and the resilience of human connection, reminding everyone that freedom required vigilance, empathy, and courage. As the Alliance prepared for the next phase of its journey, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. The struggle for trust was ongoing, but it was the crucible in which their shared future would be forged. The floating cities, shining bright against the endless darkness, were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The dawn of a new era hung heavy in the recycled air of Halcyon as Claire stood before the panoramic viewport, the vastness of space stretching infinitely beyond. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and relentless perseverance, the floating cities were no longer just rebellious outposts, they were thriving bastions of human ingenuity and hope. The Alliance had weathered internal strife and external threats, survived betrayals and sabotage, and now faced a future ripe with promise and responsibility. Today was the day they would take a decisive step forward, historic expansion treaty with Earth's United Space Coalition that would recognize the Federation's sovereignty while opening pathways for cooperation on shared challenges. The negotiations had been arduous, marked by distrust and compromise, but they signaled a turning point. Humanity was beginning to embrace a future not confined to terrestrial politics but extended boldly into the cosmos. Claire's thoughts drifted to the countless faces that had shaped this journey, the engineers who labored tirelessly to repair life support systems, the artists who breathed culture and identity into sterile corridors, the young born among the stars who dreamed not of escape but of belonging. She recalled the moments of doubt when the mission seemed impossible, the times when darkness threatened to consume their hopes. Yet here they stood, a community united by purpose and vision. As the Alliance's representatives prepared to sign the treaty, Claire addressed the assembly, her voice steady with conviction: "We come not to conquer or claim but to coexist and collaborate. Our floating cities represent the best of humanity, resilience, creativity, and a yearning for freedom. Together with Earth, we can face the challenges of our age, climate change, resource scarcity, and social injustice, and build a future where all can thrive." The response was a chorus of applause and hope, a collective breath held and released in anticipation of what was to come. With the treaty signed, communication channels opened wider, and collaborative projects were launched, from joint research on sustainable energy to cultural exchanges that celebrated diversity and unity. The Federation expanded carefully but confidently, welcoming new habitats that adhered to its principles of democracy and ecological stewardship. Technological innovation surged as minds across habitats and Earth worked in concert. The Alliance's achievements captured global attention, inspiring educational programs and policy reforms on Earth. The floating cities became beacons of possibility, proving that humanity could transcend old divisions and create new societies grounded in shared values. On a personal note, Claire found renewal and balance. The strains of leadership gave way to moments of connection, with Sam, whose unwavering support remained her anchor, with friends and colleagues who had become family, and with herself, as she embraced both the triumphs and imperfections of their journey. The challenges ahead were undeniable. Space was vast and unforgiving, and the Federation's ideals would be tested by unforeseen trials. Yet, the foundation laid by courage, cooperation, and hope offered a compass to navigate the unknown. In the final reflection, Claire understood that the floating cities were not merely physical structures, they were symbols of human potential, shining brightly against the backdrop of an infinite universe. Their story was a testament to the power of vision and action, a reminder that even amid darkness, light can be kindled and sustained. As the stars twinkled beyond the viewport, Claire smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. New horizons awaited, uncharted, challenging, and filled with promise. Life in orbit had transformed from a desperate escape into a thriving civilization, a floating testament to what humanity could achieve when it dared to dream and dared even more to act. The future was theirs to shape, and together, they would rise, bound not by gravity alone, but by the enduring bonds of hope, freedom, and love. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?